we may as well kick off. We might get a few other stragglers in the next few minutes. So, as for those of you who turned up the other day to the Ops Strategy Update and the Values Workshop, part of the operations team's operational goals this year include the rollout of our internal tools blueprint that was worked on through last year. So as part of that, David has kindly put together this presentation just to tell us a little bit more about that IT tools blueprint for a start, and then also how that's manifesting itself into the next phase of work, which is around our collaboration tools over the next few months. So I'll hand over to David.
Thanks, Chris. Hi everybody. I've got a very short format here. I'm going to try and do this in under 20 minutes and with only 10 slides. There's a lot to cover, even in an introduction, so we'll try and keep it fairly brief at this stage. We had a strategy statement from the board and from our senior team at the beginning of 2018 to build an IT tool strategy. So we were tasked with doing this, so we needed a process, obviously. So we did what anybody else would do in this case, tried to find out what were the drivers for change, what are the press points, the pain points, inventory the tools currently in use, classify, develop scenarios that will meet the drivers within the tools that we've got, evaluate scenarios against the drivers, and then finally develop a plan to implement the scenarios that we come up with. So let's look at the process further down. I think I just did a back arrow there, didn't I? I did. I'm going backwards, sorry guys. You can tell I don't do this very often. Okay, so the drivers, let's have a look at those. First of all, when we did the classification and inventory, 25% of the tools in use in the company are to do with collaboration. It's all about how we're talking together and everybody's finding their own tools to do that. So there's considerable overlap in there. Another key driver was, of course, that we've got new back-end systems coming in replacing the old. So they're new technologies, new platforms and new integration points. That's our core financials, as we heard yesterday, with NAV cutting over. And also we're using the CRM system and the sales to invoice project that's going through at the moment as well to enhance our operational delivery processes. Another thing that was actually mentioned yesterday, and we're just going to make a point here, is that we're part of a supply tool chain to our customers these days, so our communications have to be fairly seamless between our customers and our suppliers. And at the moment we're quite constrained in how we can have workflows that span those. And finally, we have to provably protect customer and private data. I'm going to break here and put a little story together here because it's kind of important to explain how important this driver is. In 2017, late 2017, a worker from Heathrow Airport was going to work and he dropped a USB key. Okay? A passerby picked it up and, being a very security-minded person, didn't stick it in his computer. He went to the library and used theirs. And on there he found an unencrypted key with thousands of unencrypted files, or over 1,000 files. Instead of taking it back to Heathrow, he did what anybody else in his position in the UK would do, and he ran off to the nearest tabloid. And we get sensational headlines because there's private data involved in there, including potentially routes the Queen might take to get to Heathrow and things like that. That furor went on for ages in the UK. It went on for weeks, created a huge stink, and of course then their Privacy Commission got involved. The Information Commissioner's Office over there, effectively the same Privacy Commission we have here. So they then went and hammered Heathrow about it. Heathrow in the meantime was taking legal action to get the information back. The Mirror, of course, being very nice about it, made copies of the key and sent one back and continued to actually expose this sort of information. The end result was, a year later, the sensationalism all started again because the Commissioner fined Heathrow £120,000 for two key reasons. They hadn't trained their staff in security and that they'd had information that left the building that wasn't encrypted. Interesting enough, in New Zealand, the same thing has occurred, and the maximum fine has been performed on a company of 168,000 New Zealand. Now our board is really focused on this, and they directed us to this incident specifically. So this constrains our choices with regard to how we can do that, sharing downstream and upstream, and how do we share data between suppliers and customers and not leak data. So we looked at the options, which is again following that process regarding after the classification, taking all those drivers, and I'm going backwards again, aren't I? So basically there were three main areas that we considered. We were running on Google. Could we enhance that to actually meet all our criteria in the drivers? The second choice was, we've got bits of best of breed in amongst all those things that people have adopted to try and solve their collaboration issues, or do we go with a whole new stack that's targeted to it? So naturally we've got a summary of the old pros and cons, which you'd expect. The bottom line is that we didn't feel that we could extend Google to meet the board's requirements or the company's requirements any further than we had. We also had issues with the best of breed stack because it was very difficult to maintain integration over time without maintaining customization and investing in that. Also, there wasn't the unified controls around proving that you were doing the right things, which is what the auditors look for and the board looks for in their monthly reports from us. So we were pretty much driven into the final column here, which is a Microsoft stack. So I want to talk about the timeline now. I'm going to break back again and talk about where we've been, where we're going with the timing of what we're doing to implement a Microsoft stack. So we've gone through the strategy, then we defined the method around August, September last year. We then created a blueprint, which I'll show you in a minute, but really it was a summary of all the classification and a sort of document you could read and kind of see where we were going with all the details. This included all the bits about rights management and sharing and all the details we needed. Cloud-based services being a priority for everything, so it's cloud first as a solution. Right, we created the blueprint obviously in September, November. So during the preparation phase and creation here, we actually did go through the senior leadership group with about 2 phases through, showing them and working through the plan. It was very short and didn't have a lot of representation because we had to target the December board meeting, so we didn't have a lot of time to do a full consultation with everybody we would have liked. However, we've tried to take at this point as much representation as we could. We delivered the board paper and the board approved it in December with a couple of caveats. The main one being that we had to sit behind in a timeline behind the 2 other major projects, NAV and sales to invoice, and the fact we can't drag staff through multiple projects concurrently. It's just too much demand. So at this stage, this is still the optimistic timeline we're working for that we gave the board in December. At this stage, we're not slipping, which is good, but we'll just work through these next bits. One of the things that came up during this thing was that our telecommunications needed to be revamped to be an integral part of the solution. Part of the Microsoft solution worldwide is to allow telephony to be a seamless part of it, but not in Australia and New Zealand. And we've been hoping that that was going to improve, but late last year they advised us that they were never going to do it. So we've been, as part of this exercise, we've spent a considerable time the last few months finding a partner that can actually do that task and link us back into Microsoft so we can get rid of all the old PBX type systems we've been maintaining over the years and put it all into Microsoft, because it's just part of collaboration. It's like some of the other things we're going to talk about shortly. The other thing we wanted to do, I've gone too far there. having selected that, the other area we felt there was a weakness was that the feedback we had received was that some of our users had been in other businesses that have done some of this transition in the past and had a less than stellar experience. Thanks, Ty. So we tried to take that into account as well. First of all, they have advanced a lot, so the product is a significantly better fit to us than it would have been, say, 2 years ago. And secondly, because we've never done it before, we made a commitment in the plan to get some third-party information, tools and intelligence into us to help us make this transition and make it as successful as possible. Where we're at right now, you see the end of May there, we've designed a proof of concept laboratory where we can actually work through with the new tools the workflows and scenarios that we need to ensure that this will deliver the value that we want for the company, that the transition is worth the hassle. So at the moment, we'll be solving the interoperability issues, we'll be solving hopefully all the conference and collaboration issues by demonstration and straw man, and then after we've gone through a full demonstration of the collaboration to the SLG, we want to move into a phase after this acquisition. We're doing that right now, by the way. We want to move into a phase where we run the lab with champions from the teams, because we don't know all your workflows and we don't know all your pain points. So we're looking forward to team contributions back into this technology to make sure we get it right before cutover. Obviously we have to in July, August, so next month we'll be starting to work on migration, how we're going to do it, the tools required to do the migration, the training and everything we may need to make it as seamless as possible when we do cut over. We've got a few chunky bits in there. We need to move our Google Drive stuff over, and we want to try and optimize that a bit better, because we've had a lot of people say that they want better indexing and searching or better utility out of that storage. We want to migrate all our file storage into the cloud here, remove local file storage. We've got to move all our mail onto Exchange in the cloud. It's not localized. So all of these things have got to happen in the background while we go through the next couple of months. We're looking at a cutover at this point, September. So that will be the point where you'd be looking at transitioning off Google and onto a complete Microsoft platform for your document management, your storage, and all that communication and collaboration. The next couple of months towards the end of the year are primarily support. We've got to make sure we've got other workflows that we already have identified 20 or 30 that we need to make sure we do, and that can be as simple as, call out claims or, whatever those. The company has a number of standard processes that we need to try and build in and do better. And we'll be planning, of course, to support people, because there will always be difficulty when 250 people or 400 people are actually migrating at once. We won't get everything right, and there will be issues we haven't anticipated. During 2020, we have a significant amount of old systems that support the company and have been supporting it for 2 decades now, that we'll be looking at obsoleting and pushing everything into the new platforms that we're building. So, by the way, I numbered these slides because there's 10, because if I suck, you know how long I'm going to suck for. So, this is actually a copy of part of the blueprint, which is actually showing. I don't expect you to read it here, because we'll make this available to you after the presentation, or I'll send a link out by the end of the week with this material and this stack. But primarily what's showing in here is almost all of the current tools and their projected new tools. If it's in grey, we're currently using it, we intend to keep using it. If it's in green, it's new and we intend it to be the new standard for whatever that function is. And if it's in the red or pink in this case, because the colours I needed to use, we want to obsolete it. The boxes with blue borders are the new areas where all those services are going to be designed for collaboration, for end-to-end, and working with our customers and suppliers. It's structured in 4 levels too. So this is the infrastructural level, the back-end core systems, front-end internal systems, and the systems that other people see outside our business.
What's the yellow, Dave?
Right, the yellow are tools that we took out of scope ourselves. They're things where the KPIs are too important for us to try and even do anything ignorantly, and it requires those work groups to actually try and achieve the goals themselves. This is particularly with our development tooling, because that's our core business. Okay, we're really building the support structures that are underneath that. So I know there's quite a lot of initiatives in this area already within the delivery teams, looking at how they can to standardise their own tooling. So just a quick run through. Some of these names you'll know, some you may not. These are the back-end support systems that currently run the business, or did last year. So there's all sorts of bits. You might have heard of PADS and LDAP and PBX and CPA and a few others like that. So this year, the core transition has been the implementation of Dynamics, the sales to invoice and NAV financials, and a few more interfaces that we need to do that. So we haven't really obsoleted anything. We haven't really made our world any easier yet. But with that platform in place we're describing, this is what we can head for, which is a much, much smaller subset of almost completely cloud-based back end. And that should support the company, hopefully, for another 2 decades. Just touching back on collaboration, I've put this quite clumsy slide together because it kind of shows where these drivers fall for us in collaboration. So those board directives I talk about, where we need digital rights management, data loss prevention, the ability to share and audit what we do with security. For our people that are working remote, you obviously need to have all the connectivity, security, the ability to actually conference yourself in. And certainly our leaders were very specific over their pain of being able to do seamless collaboration with members of the company throughout the organisation, and even with our suppliers and our customers. So this whole area here is we've been trying to solve from the point of view of collaboration. And as part of the environment, we have one tool that actually spans all of that comes out of this Microsoft stack, and it's called Teams. So we'll be talking a lot more about that during the transition, obviously, and we'll be looking to maximise the benefit of that to ensure that we get this effective and as seamless as we can technical collaboration support. We're trying to fix document format loss. We're trying to fix controlled document sharing. We're trying to fix conference and collaboration disjoints that currently occur. So, what's in it for me? So, the question you're probably all asking at the moment, this is a pretty list of bullet points and really not much else there. But you can see the point. You can read that faster than I can talk about it, but primarily it's the benefit to work anywhere, collaborate anywhere, live in the cloud, and have a lot less impedance with the tool set that we have today because of that chunkiness and point source collection. One of the things I haven't talked about that's actually underlying all of this is unified authentication. It means you've got single sign-on capability, a single login that gets reflected through all the tools. So any new tools we're going to acquire, because obviously the plan has to survive a lot of change over the next few years, I'm sure, then we'll be adopting new tools and removing old ones as we go forward. But there are some underlying principles as part of this blueprint that, so long as they're maintained, it makes it relatively easy to introduce new tools should we need to. And part of that is separating authentication from authorization. So centralized authentication means we can have central systems or a support group create and delete accounts and manage accounts and visibility in the company's secure border, but teams themselves can maintain how visible tools are to themselves with the authorization. I'm nearly out of time here. So what next? Just finishing off a little bit on that timeline. Obviously, demonstration and user stories. We're going to be I'm building stories at the moment that we can exercise, which is mainly for us to validate that things work and let people actually do a bit of role play through and see how it might work for them. Obviously technical evaluation for us to make sure that the application architecture holds together for the integration points that we're looking for in the future, and that it's easier for our developers and for our users to access and use the data that the company will be providing for future back-end systems and the current new ones. We're looking at a whole group champion trialling to ensure the best fit before we go live, and we try and expose as many of the pain points that teams have and see if we can solve it with the new technology before we put it in. We're obviously going to have more formalised and more common communications about where we're at as we go forward, so that everybody can see where they're at in the process up to the cut over and after. We'll be sharing, as I said, anything that we've produced now and the stack as well. And the training material as it develops over the next couple of months and the migration steps will obviously be made available. I've had my 20 minutes. Are there any questions you've got for me?
Is the lab going to exercise loading? Like, are you going to have like 4 or 5 people in there, or a couple of people in there? But you know, the more people you add, say a video conference on separate machines, you're going to handle that sort of thing in a lab testing?
Yeah, there is some scenarios in there. I mean, one of the big ones is document editing concurrency on the Microsoft stack. How many concurrent authors can you have on a document when we're collaborating? We want to know that before we go to make sure we can actually have. My anticipation of my testing so far says 7 or 8, but we want to validate, make sure we've got it right. We also need to ensure, as you rightly say, we need to ensure that our networking to Australia is actually up to putting the company on that, because that's where Microsoft's services are from. And that's also what we'll be doing during the next couple of months, is making sure that infrastructure is actually supporting this initiative.
Dave, search in Outlook is woeful and search in Google Mail is fantastic. Are we going to see some testing and stuff around the capabilities that Microsoft are promising now?
That's a big yes. You would have seen in that collaboration area, one of the key areas I had in there was search. Certainly I think that's one of the areas that, again, people have had poor experience with in the past with the stack, that search hasn't been as good as it should be, and we'll be looking to see whether it's improved and at least assess where we're going to be, because I'd really like to make sure that people get their expectations set correctly. If we're going to lower the standard to meet everything else, we have to know. Bear in mind too that we're not trying to make this 100% fit. We can't, you can't put in a single suite and expect it to support the company. We're looking for a better than 80%, probably close to 90% fit to our needs. Beyond that, we're either going to have to tool or preferably adapt ourselves to the limits of the tools. Okay? Yeah.
Teams appears already accessible. Is there any harm in using it?
Yeah. The problem is right now is that Teams depends on a couple of technologies underneath for full functionality. For us to have it fully functional, we need the PSTN services and the collaboration at the technical level there. We need Exchange and we need SharePoint Online, the three of them working seamlessly. So at the moment, while Teams is available, it's only partially functional. So we can do some things, but you don't get quite what we're going to get yet. And there's no seamless experience of being able to step from, from a chat up to the distribution to a conference all seamlessly, and book your team and do all the other seamless things that we were looking to do.
I think the main answer, I think your question is, even though it hasn't got everything connected to it, can you use it in the meantime? Is that the...
Yeah, well, I've seen some teams that start using it.
So the real problem with that, apart from the fact that you're not seeing all the connectivity and functionality that it's got, is that we're migrating, we're going to migrate the stuff that's inside the Google toolsets and stuff, but the actual O365 instance that we end up using will be zeroed, if you like, when we start, because there'll be a certain structure put in place, and therefore if people have got into any sort of semi-serious use of Teams in the meantime and loaded, for example, documents into it and things like that, they'll be lost. And so we'd rather not get too carried away in the next few months, or otherwise we might just, inadvertently just lose things in the transition. That's really the only reason.
Yeah, thanks, Chris.
How you said all our mail is going to be in the cloud, basically,
Mm-hmm.
We're still going to maintain a localized archive?
No.
So basically, if we have an internet outage, we're screwed accessing our mail.
Well, it depends. I mean, if you've got a full client, like Outlook does, then you can actually have all your local mails. Okay?
Oh, right, but that's personal mail.
Yeah. We are looking at how, first of all, we will still be having searchable retention of some information anyway, as we've had in the past. But again, it's about figuring out all those pieces. But we also have to look at the policies around how we're going to do legal retention and how much we're going to hold and how we manage that. And a lot of the things we need to solve are just straight process things. What happens to the account when a person joins the company and leaves the company? What do we do with their mail? And they're just practical things we have to figure out with the lab. Yeah, and some of those things are to do with retention and search. Cool. Well, thanks for coming along. Just to hear the introduction at this point. I know it's not hugely deep, but I appreciate you actually turning up to here. Thanks.